Hi everybody, welcome to the dungeon. My name is Robin and today is Lampworking 101.95. Every now and then somebody will throw out an idea at me that really just sparks my interest and catches my eye, and I'm like, wow, that's a great idea. I just want to say thank you to Heidi from Holland for asking me about this. She asked me if I ever made fruits or nuts or berries, and I haven't made any of those things in a long time. And I thought, God, that is a great idea for this 101 series. That is what we're going to make today. And they're a lot of fun and a great way to begin sculptural beadwork. Let's get right into it. And as always, I hope you're all doing safe and well out there. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time in the dungeon. All right, I'm going to start this one out by pulling out some black cane. I just don't have any rods that are thinner than a 9mm, so I usually just pull my own, especially with the black. So if you have some black store-bought stringer, that's a good size. Or if you have a thinner, like maybe a 5mm black rod, that will work too. Whatever's more comfortable for you. I just like to add my dots on these berries with a thinner cane, but if you're more comfortable working with a thicker cane, then go for it. Anyway, so what I'm doing here is I'm just getting the rest of this black rod melted into the wad I got going on here. And when I'm done heating everything up, I'm just going to round it out really quickly into this marble mold. And if you don't have a marble mold, it's okay. Just get your glass nice and hot and into an even shape and ready to pull out into a cane. All right, I'm going to shape it up one more time, getting into that football shape. And before I pull this out, I thought it would be interesting to add a transparent color on the black. This is something I've never really even thought of before, but it gave it this extra depth that I was looking for. And I really like the subtlety of having this transparent color over the black. You can use just a regular black rod if you want to, or if you want to try like a transparent blue or a transparent violet, that would look great on top of this as well. Like I said, it's really subtle, but it just gives it this little bit of extra dimension that I was looking for. Okay, so I have that coated, and I'm just going to shape it in a little bit more. And once I have that done, I will just get my other punchy rod hot and add it to the other side here and go ahead and pull this into a really nice thick cane. I have to say, I do like the way that this black with the red came out, and I might try to incorporate that into something else later on. It's just a really interesting little technique I thought about. Okay, so we're pulling this out nice and thin, and you can see where most of the heat is in the center. So, the ends where the metal punties are, you notice, are really cool. So that's why I like to use them, because it's not like you're using glass rods to pull out with, which can tend to be a little bit tricky. So anyway, you're gonna do whatever you need to do to get a black cane. Thin, thick, whatever. Like I said, whatever you're most comfortable working with is gonna work out here. All right, so let's go ahead and start this bead out. The whole thing is just going to be all black, just a nice base of color here. And you can make this any size you want. I just like to make it slightly on a larger size, just so you guys can kind of see everything in a little bit more detail. So I just start with a very gentle taper there. And what I'm looking for, you can start out on just a straight barrel shape if you want to, but I like to have a slight taper. So I'm going to add a little bit more glass to the top half and shape it up a little bit more. And the end shape here kind of looks to me like an acorn. So that's kind of the shape we're going for. All right, this is going to give me the amount that I need. This is a little large, but it worked out pretty good in the long run. However, I will let you know the larger your berry size is going to be, the longer you're going to spend adding these dots. So you really want to make sure you're working in the size that works best for you. A little bit more of a taper before we start adding all these dots. And that's about our final shape there. See how it kind of looks like an acorn in a way? All right, so what I'm going to do is turn my torch down a little bit so I have a smaller flame to work with when I add these dots. A little bit more shaping there. Okay, and what you're going to see here is when I add these dots, I'm not adding them like a normal dot. I'm actually doing a bit of a gather and getting a little ball hot on the end of my cane. And then I am very deliberately placing it down on the bead. And once you have the first one, you're going to follow up with the next one by doing the exact same thing. Get a nice gather of glass hot and then deliberately place it to where it is just touching the previous dot. And you're going to make that whole first ring that way. Each dot, same size, touching the other dot. And it takes a little bit longer to add each one of these dots than it does like when you're just, adding dots quickly. These last two, the very last one you're going to add is going to touch both, is going to touch the two dots in between it. And then on top of this, towards the mandrel side, I'm going to finish the top off here just by adding a slightly smaller dot in between the top two dots. And what's more important when you add these dots now is that you're adding them right in between the top two dots every single time. So if you're just thinking about adding dots really close together, you might end up getting into this pattern to where you're placing a dot on top of a dot and not what I mean is right under a dot instead of underneath two dots. And that can kind of start to make things look more like a row of corn than a berry. So what's most important here is not only the size of your dot, but where you're placing it, which is always going to be in between the top two dots. And other than that, you're just continuing adding the whole time, because that's the whole bead really. It's just adding these dots. And like I said, it is more of a representation of a berry than an actual hyper realistic looking berry, because you will see the underside, you will see the under color of the bead. So it's a black bead, we're adding black dots. From a few inches away, you can't even tell, but if you look very closely, you can see that background. So don't worry if your dots aren't completely, really, really tight touching each other. That kind of hyper-realistic glass working takes a long time to get to. You really need to focus on very specific things all the time to get, push yourself to get to that really realistic looking berry to where you just can't tell the difference. You'll be able to tell the difference here, but this is a great just beginning, not only technique to learn, but it's also really good dot placement practice. And there I just added a couple red dots or I guess we would call these nodes, I think. I think that's what each little bit of a berry is called. I'm not sure though, don't quote me on that. But definitely add a few different variety of dots here. You want to add a few that are red, maybe a couple that are transparent, maybe a light one. You don't have to go overboard on it, but it will definitely help the realistic aspect of the blackberry if you add a red dot here or there in the middle of all these little black dots. Okay, so we're getting closer to the end here. I'm finally making it to the bottom. And the bottom and the top dots are a little bit smaller. And the very last one placed right in between the other two. And right now I'm just going to kind of, just start to heat all of these dots in. Just enough to where I know nothing's going to pop off or break. And everything looks good to me. I like the way this turned out right here. Okay, so if you want to add a little bit of greenery to the top of your blackberry, then you can just pull out any color of green that you want. What I ended up doing here was pulling out, it was probably, I think it was 2 opaque greens and 2 transparent greens that I pulled out into a stringer just to give it a little more lifelike appearance. And I'm just going to add little dots to the very edge and slightly pull them out and then cut the rod off into the flame, making these little tiny leaves. And we are just about done. If you make at least 3 or 4 of these or 5 and you got a little handful of them, they look even more realistic. And just be careful, don't let anybody put them in their mouths or eat them because some of these can look that good. Anyway, I hope you guys all enjoyed this fun little berry making that we have going on today. And let me know what you think about this one. I thought it turned out great, and I do really enjoy seeing that little bit of red with the black too. So on that note, I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.